mouth. The oral cavity is lined throughout with the mucus. Dear students, welcome to this unit. We are going to talk about the digestive system. My name, I'm Kideni Robina. During this session, our specific objectives are as follows. By the end of this session, students will be able to identify the organs of the alimentary system, describe the structure and the functions of the mouth, esophagus, and the stomach. Organs of the alimentary system. The digestive system is the collective name used to describe the alimentary canal. Some accessory organs and a variety of digestive processes which take place at different levels in the diet for absorption. The activities in the digestive system follow 5 main stages, that is the ingestion, propulsion, digestion, absorption, and the elimination. Alimentary tract is a long tube through which food passes. It starts from the mouth and ends at the anus. The digestive system is made up of the following organs. We have the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and the anal canal. Accessory organs include the 3 pairs of salivary glands, pancreas, liver, and the biliary tract. Let's start by looking at the mouth or the oral cavity. The mouth or oral cavity. Structures associated with the mouth include anteriorly we have the lips, posteriorly it is continuous with the oropharynx, then laterally by the muscle of the cheeks, then superiorly we have by the bony hard palate and the muscular soft palate. Inferiorly by the muscular tongue and the soft tissues of the floor of the mouth. The oral cavity is lined throughout with a mucous membrane consisting of stratified squamous mucus secreting gland. The part of the mouth between the gums and the cheeks is the vestibule, and the remainder of the cavity is the mouth proper. The roof of the cavity is formed by the hard palate and the soft palate. So when you pass your tongue from the beginning, from the anterior part, moving backwards, you start with the hard palate, then you move to the soft palate. A cone-shaped prolongation hangs down in the back of the mouth is called the uvula. So when one opens the mouth, you can be able to see this prolongation that is hanging down at the mouth right there. So let's start looking at the tongue. This is the voluntary muscular structures which occupies the floor of the mouth. It is attached to the hyoid bone in the neck. On the surface of the tongue, we find the numerous papillae. In what we can say, the small projections containing nerve endings of the sense of taste buds. So these are the ones that you can get on the tongue, and they are tiny. They are very, very important for the taste. There are three varieties of papillae. We have the valvate papillae, usually between 8 to 12 altogether, are arranged in an inverted V-shaped toward the base of the tongue. So they are arranged in such a way that the upper part is narrower then the lower part or the base is wide. That is why we are saying that inverted V-shaped. So these are the largest of the papillae and are the most easily seen. Then we have the fungiform papillae. It is situated mainly at the tip and the edge of the tongue and are more numerous than the valvate papillae. Then we have the fusiform papillae, are the smallest of the three types. They are most numerous on the surface of the anterior two to third of the two-thirds of the tongue. So right there we have a pictorial that is showing the tongue, and as you can see behind there we have the epiglottis. So when you move to the front you can see all those the papillae that we have been talking about. Blood supply. Anterior blood supply is by the lingual branch of the external carotid artery. Venous drainage is by the lingual vein, which joins the internal jugular vein. The hypoglossal nerves, that is the nerve supply. The hypoglossal nerves, 12 cranial nerves, which supply the voluntary muscle tissue. Then we have the lingual branch of the mandibular nerves, which are the nerves of somatic, that is the ordinary sensation, i.e. pain, temperature, and the touch. So they are the ones that are responsible for that. They are the ones that help the tongue to sense pain, to sense temperature, for you to know that this what has been put in the mouth is hot or is cold, and for you to know if the tongue is touched. The facial and the glossopharyngeal nerves, that is the seventh and the ninth cranial nerves, which are the nerves of the special sensation of taste. We can feel four tastes, that is the sour, sweet, bitter, salt. An organ of the functions of the tongue. The tongue is an organ of taste, helps in mastication, that is turning around of food once it is in the mouth, then assists in swallowing and assists in speech. Let's look at the sublingual glands. Under the surface of the tongue is connected to the floor with a small string called frenulum. On the floor of mouth, under the tongue, the sublingual glands and the submandibular glands enter. They deduct from the third pair of salivary glands. The parotid glands enter the mouth opposite the second upper molar. The three pair of glands that secrete water, 90%, enzyme, that is the enzyme ptyalin or the salivary amylase, then mucin or what is known as the lubricant, then the small amount of calcium. So functions of the saliva. Saliva moisten the food and the mouth, then moisten and lubricate the food. Ptyalin converts carbohydrates. The ptyalin is the enzyme that is responsible for digestion of carbohydrates in the mouth. Then it stimulates the taste buds and clean the mouth and the teeth. So these are the functions of the saliva. Let's look at the teeth. The teeth are embedded in the alveoli or sockets of the alveolar ridges of the mandible and the maxilla. Each individual develops two sets of teeth, the temporary teeth or deciduous or the milky teeth. There are 20 teeth in number, 10 in each jaw. The first erupt 5 to 8 months after the baby is born. They are complete at 2 years. The permanent teeth, which are always 32 in number, they replace the milky teeth at the age of 6 years, and usually they are complete until the age of 26 years. According to their shape and the their shape and position, they are classified into 4 groups. We have the incisors. Here, they are 2 in number on each side of the jaws. They are sharp edged for biting the food, and they have only one root. Then we have the canines. This one is 1 in number on each side of the jaw, and they have large conical crown claws for grasping the food, and they have only one root. Then we have the premolars, 2 on each side. They have 2 elevations or cusps on the crown, and they also have a single root or one root. Then we have the molars. These ones are 3 on each side. The largest teeth within 4 to 5 cusps for grinding or chewing the food. The upper molars have 3 roots, and the lower has 2 roots. So that is how they are right there. So this is the pictorial showing the molar, the premolar, then the canine. Then the incisor is not so clear, but you can still get it in your notes clearly. Structure of a tooth. Although the shape of different teeth vary, the structure is the same, and it consists of the crown, which is the part which protrudes from the gum, then the root, the part embedded in the bone, then the neck, slightly narrowed region where the crown merges with the root. The tooth consists of mainly dentine, a very hard material. The enamel covers exposed portion of the tooth and is even harder than the dentine. The hollow cavity is called the pulp. It consists of connective tissue with the blood vessels and the nerves passing down to the root in fine canals. So the teeth are fixed to the gum by special cement and a strong layer of connective tissue. So right there we have the structure of the tooth, and those are the parts that I was talking about. So right up here, the part that we can see, the part of our teeth that we can see is the one that is called the crown. Then down we have the root. So you can see that we have also the neck right here. So the neck is the one that is between the root and the crown. Then down there we have the cement. The cement is the one that embeds inside the gum. It's the one that holds the tooth inside the gum. Then we have the gum right there. Then the pulp cavity, the one that is consisting of the nerves and the blood vessels. Then we have the dentine, which is the hard part of the tooth. Then the enamel, which is the hardest, and covering up all the other structures of the tooth. Now, let's look at the blood supply. Is by branches of maxillary arteries. The venous drainage is by a number of veins which empty into the internal jugular veins. Nerve supply to the upper teeth is by branches of the maxillary nerve, and to the lower teeth by branches of the mandibular nerves. These are both branches of the trigeminal nerves, which is the fifth cranial nerves. Let's look at the pharynx. The oropharynx and the laryngopharynx are passages common to both the respiratory and digestive system. Food passes from the oral cavity into the pharynx, then to the esophagus below. When food reaches the pharynx, swallowing is no longer under voluntary control. It now moves on its own. The esophagus, this is a 25 centimeter long muscular tube, consists of 4 layers of tissue, lies behind the trachea extending from the pharynx with an upper sphincter, which is known as cricopharyngeal sphincter, which prevents air passing into esophagus when the act of swallowing takes place and prevent content from esophagus enter the trachea. When the esophagus enters through the diaphragm, it curves up and into the stomach. We can find the cardiac sphincter that prevents the gastric acid to enter the esophagus to make sure that the esophagus is kept free from the irritation of the acid. So right there we have that structure. We have here the esophagus, as you can see. Then we have right there the throat. The pharynx is right there. Then we have the upper esophageal sphincter. Then the trachea. Blood supply. The thoracic region of the esophagus is supplied mainly by the esophageal arteries. The abdominal region is supplied by branches from the inferior phrenic arteries and the celiac artery. Venous drainage is into the azygos and the hemizygous veins. The abdominal part drains into the left gastric veins. Nerve supply is by sympathetic and the parasympathetic nerves. Let's look at the stomach. The stomach is a J-shaped dilated portion of the alimentary tract situated in the epigastric, umbilical, and left hypochondriac regions of the abdominal cavity. Structures associated with the stomach include the following. Anteriorly, we have the left lobe of liver and the anterior abdominal wall and the anterior abdominal wall. Then posteriorly, we have the abdominal aorta, pancreas, spleen, left kidney, and the adrenal glands. Then superiorly, we have the diaphragm, esophagus, and the left lobe of liver. Inferiorly, we have transverse colon and the small intestine. To the left, we have the diaphragm and the spleen. Then to the right, we have the liver and the duodenum. Let's look at the structure of the stomach. The stomach is continuous with the esophagus at the cardiac sphincter and the duodenum at the pyloric sphincter. So these sphincters, the cardiac sphincter separates the stomach from the esophagus and the pyloric sphincter separates the stomach from the duodenum to make sure that these contents do not mix. It has a greater curvature and a lesser curvature. The upper part of the stomach is called the fundus, middle portion called the body, and the lowest part the antrum. So right there we can see in that picture the fundus of stomach, then body of stomach, then we have the pyloric part of the stomach. The pyloric sphincter relaxes when the food enters the duodenum. Inside the stomach, there are folds of mucosa membrane called derugi, which help the stomach to extend during eating. So when the person eats, they open up and the stomach can extend. So they are right there in that picture. As you can see, we have the esophagus right there, the lower esophageal sphincter. Then we have the fundus right there. Then we have the pyloric sphincter right there. So this separates and make sure that the contents that are in the stomach do not mix with those in those other parts of the alimentary canal. Let's look at wall of the stomach. The four layers of tissues that comprise the basic structure of the alimentary canal are found in the stomach. We have the muscle layer. This consists of three layers of smooth muscle fibers. That is, an outer layer of longitudinal fibers, a middle layer of circular fibers, and an inner layer of oblique fibers. This arrangement allows for peristaltic movement. Circular, circular muscle is stronger in the pyloric antrum and the sphincter. There are four numerous gastric glands situated below the surface in the mucous membrane. They consist of specialized cells that secrete gastric juice. For example, mucus, enzymes, hydrochloric acid and the intrinsic factor, histamine and the serotonins. A large amount of lymph nodes are situated here and prevent the spread of infections from organs to peritoneum. So let's look at the blood supply. Arterial blood is supplied to the stomach by branches of the celiac artery. Then the venous drainage is into the portal vein. Then from there, the blood can be taken until it reaches the heart. Then the nerve supply is by both sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic stimulation reduces the motility of the stomach and the secretion of gastric juice, whereas the parasympathetic stimulation has the opposite effect. So that means that it increases the motility of the stomach and the secretion of the gastric juice. Functions of the stomach. One is temporary storage of food, allowing time for digestive enzymes, pepsin, to act. So the digestive enzyme that is found there is the pepsin, and the food, when it is taken, when it is swallowed and it reaches the stomach, it is kept there temporarily for this pepsin to act, and it is mainly acts on proteins. So chemical digestion, pepsin converts proteins to polypeptides. Mechanical breakdown, the three smooth muscle layers enable the stomach to act as a chime. Gastric juice is added and the contents are liquefied to chime. Limited absorption of water, alcohol and some lipid soluble drugs. So this can be absorbed in the water, though much of the absorption of the water takes place in the large intestine. The other function is non-specific defense against microbes provided by hydrochloric acid in a gastric juice. Vomiting may be a response to ingestion of gastric irritants, for example, microbes or chemicals. Functions of the stomach continued. Another function is preparation of iron for absorption. Further along the tract, the acid environment of the stomach solubilizes iron salts, which is required before iron can be absorbed. Production of intrinsic factor, this is the other function, needed for absorption of vitamin B12 in the terminal ileum. Then the other function is regulation of the passage of gastric contents into the duodenum. When the chyme is sufficiently acidified and liquefied, the pyloric antrum forces small jets of gastric contents through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. Remember we talked about the pyloric sphincter that is separates the duodenum from the stomach. So once the chyme is now sufficiently acidified, the enough acid has been added and enough liquid has been added on it, it will be released in bits into the duodenum until it is finished from the stomach. Then the other function is secretion of gastrin hormone, and those are the functions. Let's look at the key points. So the key points here we have the digestive system is the system that deals with the digestion and the absorption of food. It involves four main processes, i.e. ingestion, propulsion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. The four gastric glands situated below the tongue consist of specialized cells that secrete mucus, enzyme, hydrochloric acid, and intrinsic factor, histamine, and serotonin, which help in digestion. So, evaluation: define the alimentary system, list the functions of the stomach, mention the senses found in the tongue. So that is all about that. Let us look at the general structure of the alimentary system. So generally, walls of the alimentary tract are formed by four layers of tissue. We have the adventitia, or the outer covering, or what we normally call the peritoneum. This is the largest serous membrane of the body. It consists of a closed sac with two layers of serous membrane. It contains a small amount of serous fluid within the abdominal cavity. It is richly supplied with blood and lymph vessels and contains a considerable number of lymph nodes. It provides a physical barrier to local spread of infection and can isolate infective organs such as appendicitis, preventing involvement of other abdominal structures. So it has a protective function. It acts as a curtain to make sure that it protects the inner organs from uh, getting infected. It has two layers. We have the parietal layer, which lies the abdominal wall, then visceral layer, which covers the organs or the viscera within the abdominal and the pelvic cavities. Thus, the peritoneal cavity is only a potential cavity. So here the parietal part is the one that faces the abdominal wall. Then the one that faces the organs is the one that is called the visceral layer. The two layers of peritoneum are actually in contact, and the friction between them is prevented by the presence of serous fluid secreted by the peritoneal cells. So between those layers, the parietal and the visceral, there's what is called the serous fluid, which is secreted by the peritoneal cells, and it helps in preventing friction between the two layers. Muscle layer. This consists of two layers of smooth muscle or involuntary muscles. Between the layers, there are lymph vessels and plexus or group of sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. Peristalsis occurs because of contraction as waves in this muscle layer. The submucosal layer, it is a layer of loose connective tissue consisting of many plexuses of blood vessels. So when we talk about plexuses, it's like a group of blood vessels, nerves, lymph vessels, and a varying amount of lymphoid tissue. Then the mucosal lining, mucous membrane formed by columnar epithelium is the innermost layer and has three main functions. One is protection, secretions, and absorption. Mucus lubricates the walls of the tract and protects them from digestive enzymes. Nerve supply. The alimentary tract is supplied by nerves from both divisions of the autonomic nervous system, i.e., the parasympathetic supply, which is the vagus nerve, then the stimulation causes smooth muscle contraction and the secretion of digestive juices. Then the sympathetic supply helps in reducing the smooth muscles contraction and the glandular secretions. Structure and the function of the small and the large intestines. The specific objectives right here we are looking at. By the end of this session, students will be able to describe the structure and functions of the small intestine, then describe the structure and functions of the large intestines. Structure of small intestine. The small intestine is continuous with the stomach at the pyloric sphincter and leads into the large intestine at the ileocecal valve. It is approximately 5 meters long. The smooth intestine comprises of three main sections which are continuous with each other. We have the duodenum. This lies in a C shape curved around pancreas. It is about 25 centimeters long. Then we have the jejunum. This is the middle section of the small intestine and is about 2 meters long. Then we have the ileum. This is a terminal section, is about 3 meters long and ends at the ileocecal valve. It controls the flow of material from the ileum to the cecum. The first part of large intestine and prevents regurgitation. Regurgitation coming back of the food into the stomach. As described before, the small intestines have 4 layers. In the inner layer, the mucous membrane is arranged in folds, which are known as the rugae, which increase the surface area for absorption and secretions of the nutrients. The total area for absorption is 250 meters squared. The surface of the membrane is covered with small villi, small finger-like projections. Those are the ones that they call the villi. Each villi consists of a network of blood capillaries and a central lacteal connected with a lymph vessel in order to absorb fat. Between the villi, there are many intestinal glands that secrete the digestive enzymes. Blood supply. The superior mesenteric artery supplies the whole of the small intestine, and venous drainage is by the superior mesenteric vein. Nerve supply. Both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves supply the small intestine. Functions of the small intestines. Onward movement of its content, which is produced by peristalsis. Secretion of intestinal juice. Then protection against infection by microbes that have survived the antimicrobial action of the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. Functions of the small intestines continue. Completion of chemical digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in the enterocytes of the villi. So all the digestion ends right there. All the chemical digestion ends right there in the small intestine. It does not continue further. Then secretion of hormones, that is cholecystokinin, which can be known as CCK, and secretion should be secreting. Absorption of nutrients. Structure and functions of the large intestine. This is about 1.5 meters long, beginning at the cecum in the right iliac fossa and terminating at the rectum and the anal canal deep in the pelvis. Its lumen is larger than that of the small intestine. It is divided in several parts. We have the cecum, we have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the sigmoid colon. The cecum is the first part of the colon. It is a dilated region which has a blind end inferiorly and is continuous with the ascending colon superiorly. The vermiform appendix is a fine tube closed at one end which leads from the cecum below ileocecal valve. It contains lymphoid tissue. Inflammation of the appendix is called appendicitis. So when the appendix is inflamed by some microorganisms, that condition is called appendicitis, and I think it's very common. The ascending colon, it passes upwards to the hepatic flexure just below the liver. The transverse colon, this hangs in a fold of peritoneum, the greater omentum, where it passes across the abdominal cavity to the splenic flexure. The descending colon, it passes down the left side of the abdominal cavity, then curves towards the midline. After it enters the pelvic, and it is known as the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid colon, this part describes an S-shaped curve in the pelvic, then continue downwards to become the rectum. So the rectum, this is a slightly dilated section of the colon, about 13 centimeters long. It leads from the sigmoid colon and terminates in the anal colon. The anal colon, the anal canal, this is a short passage about 3.8 centimeters long in the adult and leads from the rectum to the exterior. It is controlled by two sphincters, namely, so before we go into the sphincters, we are looking at the structure right there. We have the large intestine and the small intestine. As you can see, then in the large intestines, we have the cecum right there, then we have the ascending colon, then we have the transverse colon and the descending colon right there. So the sphincters include the internal and the internal anal sphincter. This is a circular smooth muscle fiber is an involuntary muscle. Then the rectum is usually empty until peristaltic movement pass feces from the sigmoid flexure into the rectum. The extended rectum cause impulses to pass to the brain and give impulses to contractions in descending colon, sigmoid flexure, and rectum at the same time, and the internal sphincter relaxes. So when it relaxes, that is when the person will be able to pass out the stools. The external and anal sphincter. This is under conscious control through the pudendal nerve. As the internal sphincter relaxes at the same time, signals are passed to the brain, and the desire to defecate is conscious. So, if the time is appropriate, the external sphincter relaxes voluntarily and feces pass. So, after the internal sphincter relaxes, signals are sent to the brain, and if the time is appropriate, the person is at the right time, then the external sphincter can now be opened and the person passes the stool. So when defecation post is voluntarily postponed, the feeling of fullness and the need to defecate tends to fade. So then the person relaxes. But in cases of diarrhea, this may be imminent in that it may not fade off. Blood supply. Arterial supply is mainly by the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries. Then the venous drainage mainly by the superior and inferior mesenteric veins. Functions of the large intestines. The functions one is absorptions. In the large intestine, the absorption of water continues until the familiar semi-solid consistency of feces is achieved. Mineral salts, vitamins, and some drugs are also absorbed into the blood capillaries from the large intestine. Microbial activity. The large intestine is heavily colonized by by certain types of bacteria which synthesize vitamin K and folic acid. They include Escherichia coli, Enterobacter urogini, Streptococcus faecalis, and Clostridium perfringens, or what we can call Welch. These microbes are commensals in humans. They can stay without causing any problem unless their conditions of stay have changed. They may become pathogenic if transferred to another part of the body. For example, Escherichia coli may cause cystitis if it gains access to the urinary bladder. But if it remains where it is, it cannot cause any problem. The small key points to note: the small intestine is continuous with the stomach at the pyloric sphincter and leads into the large intestine at the ileocecal valve. The duodenum, jejunum, and ileum are the parts of the small intestines. The large intestine is divided into ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid colon. These are the organs responsible for digestion, absorption of food, as well as excretion and elimination of waste products. Evaluation. Define small intestine. Mention the parts of the small intestine. List the functions of the small intestine. Structure and function of the accessory organs of the digestive system. So specific objectives. By the end of this session, students will be able to identify the accessory organs of the digestive system, describe the structure and functions of the accessory organs of the digestive system. Let's start with the pancreas. Pancreas is an endocrine and exocrine gland situated just behind the stomach. The size is 12 to 15 centimeters and the gland is pink grayish. It weighs 60 grams. The pancreatic duct joins together with the common bile duct and enter the duodenum at the ampulla of Vater. The structure. The pancreas is an elongated tapered organ located across the back of the abdomen behind the stomach. The right side of the organ, called the head, is the widest part of the organ and lies in the curve of the duodenum, the first section of the small intestine, like we have mentioned before. The tapered side, the tapered left side extends slightly upward, called the body of the pancreas, and ends near the spleen, called the tail. The pancreas is made up of two types of tissue. We have the exocrine tissue. The exocrine tissue secretes digestive enzymes. These enzymes are secreted into a network of ducts that join the main pancreatic duct, which runs the length of the pancreas until they reach where they are needed. And we have the endocrine tissue. The endocrine tissue, which consists of the isolates of Langerhans, secretes hormones into the bloodstream. So why that is how we differentiate them. The exocrine secretes um, into the ducts, whereas the endocrine secrete hormones into straight into the bloodstream. So right there, we have that structure, and as you can see, we have the duodenum right there. Then here we have the pancreas. Here we have the duct cells that secrete aqueous substance. Then we have these other ones right there. Then you can see that this part, this is what we were talking about, that the head, it looks a little bit bigger compared to the other parts of the pancreas. So that still shows the same, and it is showing us the other organs that are around that specific organ. Functions of the pancreas. The pancreas has digestive and hormonal functions. The enzymes secreted by the exocrine tissue in the pancreas help to break down carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and acids in the duodenum. These enzymes travel down the pancreatic duct into the bile duct in an inactive form. When they are when they enter the duodenum, they are activated. The exocrine tissue also secretes bicarbonate to neutralize the stomach acid in the duodenum. So remember, we talked about the acidification of the food when it reaches the stomach. So once it passes the stomach and enters the duodenum, normally the bicarbonates are ready to neutralize the acid that has been passed along with the food. The hormones secreted by the endocrine tissue in the pancreas are insulin and glucagon, which regulate the level of glucose in the blood. The liver. This is the largest and vital organ in the body, weighing 1 to 2.5 kilograms, situated in the upper quadrant of the abdominal cavity. It is divided into the right and the left lobes, separated by the falciform ligament. The liver is completely enclosed in the peritoneum. The hilum or portal tissue is the door of the liver where all the blood vessels and nerves entering and leaving the liver except the hepatic vein. So right there we have that pictorial that shows the liver. We have the gallbladder there, we have the round ligament, we have the falciform ligament, then the left lobe and the right lobe. The right lobe is bigger than the lefty lobe. Then we have the coronary ligament right there. So this is when you have turned the liver inside out. This is what you are able to see. The liver is composed by a large amount of lobes. Each lobule is cylindrical in shape, which equals to 2 millimeters. Each lobule is surrounded by a connective tissue. Each lobule has a central vein that drains the blood to the hepatic vein. So the large liver cells, which what we call the hepatocytes, are radiating out uh, from the central vein, and between these cords of cells where we find the bile canaliculus. The bile canaliculus join to form intralobular ducts which unite and become the right and left hepatic duct. Blood enter the liver from two sources: the hepatic artery, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the liver, and it also carries fat from the lymphatic system. The hepatic portal vein that carries blood directly from the digestive system into the liver. Secretion of functions of the liver, we have secretion of the bile, an exocrine function which helps carry away waste and break down fats in the small intestines during digestion. Then storage of glycogen, which will be converted uh, to glucose when the blood glucose level is low. Also, the liver is able to convert amino acids to glucose. So when the amino acids, which are product of the proteins, are much in the body, they can be converted into glucose and kept in the body. Then, when needed, they can now be broken down and uh, energy is released. The other function is store fat. Stored fat is broken down to provide energy, and the carbohydrates and the amino acids are converted to fat to be stored. Then another one, storage of vitamins in large amounts, and these are vitamin A, D, and B12. The liver is able to synthesize vitamin A from carotene. The other function is storage of iron in form of ferritin, derived from worn-out red blood cells, reused in blood formation. Production of clotting factors such as fibrinogen, prothrombin, and factor 7, thus regulating blood clotting. The other function is production of heat. The liver uses a considerable amount of energy, and it has a high metabolic rate and produces a great deal of heat, which can be required by the body. The detoxification of drug and noxious substances. These include ethanol, which is alcohol, and the toxins produced by microbes. The other function is production of the plasma proteins, for example, albumin, globulin, and many others. This can be produced from the liver. Then deamination, the removal of nitrogen of the amino acids to form ammonia. The ammonia is converted by the liver to uric acid as a waste product and is excreted out. Resisting infections by producing immune factors and removing bacteria from the bloodstream. So the liver is important in producing factors that help fight bacteria from our bodies. Production of cholesterol and the special proteins to help carry fat through the body. So those are the functions. Let us look at the biliary tract. This is composed of bile duct and the gallbladder. Structure. The gallbladder is a pear-shaped sac attached under the surface of the right lobe of the liver. The gallbladder can store up to 60 ml of bile in a very concentrated form. The right and the left hepatics form the common hepatic duct. This duct enters the gallbladder with the bile through the cystic duct. When the bile leaves the gallbladder through the cystic duct, it enters common bile duct and joined together with the pancreatic duct and continue through the hepatopancreatic sphincter, or what is called as sphincter of Oddi in the duodenum. So right there we have that pictorial that is showing the liver and showing us where the gallbladder is formed. As you can see, it is embedded inside the liver. Then we have these other structures also right there. Composition of the bile. So the bile is about 500 ml and is secreted by the liver daily, and it consists of the following. It consists of water, mineral salts, mucus, bile pigments, mainly bilirubin. So bile pigments derived from the breakdown of erythrocytes in the bile. It is converted to urobilinogen. Some is reabsorbed in the blood and some excreted with feces and the urine out of the body. Then bile salts, which are derived from the primary bile salts and the chronic acid. Then the bile salts break up lipids into fatty acids and glycerol in the small intestine. So they are very important for that function during digestion. Functions of the gallbladder. The gallbladder acts as a reservoir for bile, concentrates bile by up to 10 to 15 fold by absorption of water through the walls of the gallbladder. Release of stored bile. When the muscle of the walls of the gallbladder contracts, bile passes through the bile ducts to the duodenum. Contractions is stimulated by, oh sorry, that's where we're in. Let's look at key points. The liver is the largest and the vital organ in the body, weighing 1 to 2.5 kilograms, situated in the upper quadrant of the abdominal cavity. It is divided into the right and the left lobes, separated by the fascicle form ligament. The main forms of the liver are categorized into secretion, storage. Those are the main functions: secretion, storage, digestion, and the elimination of various substances. Pancreas is an important organ which plays an important role in carbohydrate metabolism through production of insulin. So the gallbladder secretes and stores the bile. Evaluation: mention the accessory organs of the digestion of the digestive system. Then what are the functions of the liver? What is the importance of insulin in the body? So thank you so much for paying attention to this. May God bless you.